Hi everyone, this is Tegan Riley for my week 1 justice discussion. I'm choosing the third prompt about your motivations for doing justice and how it should be driven by God's grace and hope and His renewing work. I would say that for me, my motivation for justice so far has mostly been reason and emotion. I feel like it's just I'm a pretty empathetic person, so I would say that it would make sense to me that you would seek the good of others and that you would be avoiding doing harm to them. And then especially as like a future nurse and stuff like that, that's pretty important to that kind of career. And then emotion, it's just, I would feel guilty if I wasn't, if I was like actively causing harm, or if I was not avoiding it or trying to do good by other people. So I'd say that those have been two big of the factors that have driven that. But I would say that I've noticed that doing it through, or using faith as a motivation for justice and God's grace is definitely more sustainable, because it can be difficult after a while to be trying to rely on your own ability to reason and your own ability or your own emotions to try to continuously be like doing justice, because your emotions can only carry you so far, and eventually you get burned out if you are like just only relying on that. And your reasoning, there's so many things that happen that are like unspeakable or that you can't really make a difference for, so then it would be like against your own reasoning, and you have to understand that there's something higher than you that's at play in that. So by grounding it in faith or in the gospel, it would make it more sustainable, because you always have something that is unchanging to turn back to when you're thinking about how you're doing justice. And you have like the guideline of the gospel is pretty, like, I'd say it's pretty clear, and it's not changing, so it's easy to not easy, but you're able to find how Jesus lived his life, and then essentially you can, for the most part, copy that, and or like do your best to copy it and then mimic how Jesus lived, and that would be essentially doing justice. But practices to sustain the long term, I think just remembering where my ability to do that comes from, because it's not always easy to be trying to seek the good of others and to do things like that, but when you realize that God created all of us in his image, so we're all like, people aren't just randomly put there. God has reasoning for them, and they have purpose and worth, even if like you're annoyed or even if other things happen. So just remembering like where they come from and who God says they are, along with who God says you are, when you think about how you're approaching things like that, and even harder topics with that like require justice, just remembering the human first and how God would view them and what Jesus would be doing in that situation. And remembering that you have the ability to be doing justice because you have a God who loves you and who has unabounding faith. So tapping into that resource when you're feeling tired or discouraged, and just remembering that you have someone there at your side at all times, is how I think I would sustain a long-term hopeful approach to justice. So thanks.